chapter 6 of the book of Mark in terms of our study. But before I get into chapter 6, I want to review by answering the questions for chapter 5. And so if you have your question sheets, you can grab those. We'll answer the questions for chapter 5 by way of review. Then we'll jump into our study of chapter 6 this morning. And so grab those if you have them handy. And when we get to a question maybe related to it, I'll answer a question we had Wednesday that I wasn't really as ready to answer Wednesday night as I could. So here he said, who met Jesus immediately after he left the boat? Okay, so there was this one with an unclean spirit that came to him. And it's interesting, and I'll go ahead and just deal with this now because this is the question we had. Mark chapter 5, Luke chapter 8, and Matthew chapter 8 are three parallel accounts of the same moment in time in relationship to what Jesus is doing. The challenge or the interesting aspect that comes up in that discussion is the fact that Mark chapter 5, Mark records that a man, a single entity with multiple legion, demons, right? Luke records it the same way in Luke chapter 8. A certain man came who had devils. Matthew records it in Matthew chapter 8 that two men had come and that had been possessed with devils. And as best as I can tell, they are the same moment in time that's being recorded between those three different writers. And you might ask, well, then why? Why would Matthew say two and the others just say a certain man or something relatively the same as that? And I guess the first answer to that is I don't necessarily know for sure why they would choose different modes, because they don't tell us why they chose different modes of recording this piece of history. I can tell you reasonable reasoning behind what may have happened. You could talk about the fact that maybe, well, let me back you up a step. Who really is under discussion, or who's really having a discussion in the text? Who are the two entities of focus in that moment? That's right. The focus in that moment. This isn't a conversation between, in none of the accounts, is it a conversation between Jesus and the man. The man is out of his mind. The man is being controlled by the demons. He runs around untamed. They've tried to chain him. He doesn't wear any clothes. He is completely out of control in this circumstance. And the text, all three of them, the emphasis of discussion is about what happens between Legion and Jesus. And the conversation they have and the results of that conversation, and none of those pieces, by the way, change. All of that aspect of it is all the same. And so easily you could see why maybe Mark and Luke just decide we're dealing with Legion and Jesus, and so a certain man. Maybe one in particular, I read one case where they said maybe one man in particular seemed to be in greater distress than another, and so that becomes the focus of attention. We could speculate all day long, but it doesn't change, either way you want to look at it, it doesn't change what really happened. The focus of attention is not on the man. The focus of attention is upon the conversation between Jesus and Legion, that multiple devils, if you will, and that's where the focus stayed. Even after the man, when they come back and they see him over there, and now he's what? He's normal, he's dressed, right? And what's he want to do? Yeah, he said, he comes to Jesus, he said, let me come and go, and possibly that's why Mark and Luke focus on him. Maybe only one of them returned to have that conversation with Jesus about wanting to travel with him. And so the focus becomes upon him. There's all kinds of reasonable explanations, if you will, of why that might be. But what did Jesus tell him? Yeah, go tell your family and your friends. Okay, that'd be all right. But I'm not looking for a walking example right now. to travel with me. The focus wasn't on the man. He gained the benefit ultimately and was secured by this situation. But the focus was on Jesus' power over the unclean spirits. The focus was Jesus' ability to control not just the natural world, which he'd already been demonstrating over and over and over again, but very specifically, even in conversational mode, to be able to handle what unclean spirits as well. And so that's the best response to the question we had on Wednesday night that I was able to surmise for you. Second question then. Describe the severity of this man's condition. And I just did. Thank you for that. What I just said. It was pretty severe at all the different... couldn't tame him, tried to chain him, would break the fetters, would scratch at him and pluck them apart. Just completely out of control. Yeah. What did this man do and say when he approached Jesus? Yeah, the Legion begins to speak in that conversation about how, please leave me alone, basically. What question did Jesus ask? Yeah, what's your name? And what did the demon ask? Yeah, what did he ask? He asked, don't send us away, is what he asked in that moment. What happened to the demons? Okay, they went into the swine. And what happened then? Yeah, they ran over the steep and into the sea. Well, I was asked that Wednesday night. There's no way. One comment was it would be unusual maybe for Jews to own swine, but there's no indication one way or the other exactly who these. Well, there's no. My estimation is they want him to leave because they don't want another 2,000 swine to run off the cliff. They were maybe in awe of the power, but if your power means you have the ability to do that kind of thing, maybe you could just go do something else in another town. Thank you, but right, we've seen enough. You can go on. Their livelihoods were at stake in their own minds. What was asked of Jesus when the word spread of what he had done? Yeah, that's what we just talked about. Could you just go on somewhere else and continue to work? What did the man who had been demon-possessed request? Yeah, to go with him, right? To go with him. And what did Jesus tell him to do? Yeah, go tell your friends and family, but you're down where you're from. But he wasn't going to be traveling with them. Who did Jesus encounter when they crossed back to the other side? Jairus, right? Who was he, by the way? Leader in the synagogue, right? And what was this man's problem? Yeah, it wasn't his problem, right? Remember, it was his daughter was very sick, and he was wanting Jesus to come and to assist her. Whom did they encounter on the way to solving this problem? Yeah, a woman who had had an issue of blood for 12 years and described the extent of her problem. Physicians had done what? It had put her through all kinds of horrible things to try to figure out, and all it left her was still with the issue of blood and worse, and broke. She'd spent all that she'd had to try to resolve the problem. Yes? That's where he was from. It's a region, yeah. Yeah. Most likely Greek descent because of the colonies they were, or the areas and regions in which they were living in. And that's a reasonable conclusion. What did she do to receive the healing from that issue of blood? He touched his garment, right? Windows is going to play games. Sorry. Apologize. We'll pull this back up real quick if I can. Not sure what I did to cause that, but go back down here to chapter 5. So she touched the And did Jesus notice it? Yeah, immediately notices that somebody had touched him, and that what had left from him? Yeah, power had left from him. He could sense it. We talked about the fact that he had been in a pretty big crowd up until that point in time. In fact, he asked what question? Who touched me? What does the disciples say? Yeah, you're kidding me. That's basically what they said. How are we supposed to know who? You're in a crowd with all these people. How are we supposed to know who it is that touched you? What final statement does Jesus make to the woman? Your faith has made you whole, and the benefit that brought to her. What word came concerning Jairus' daughter in this period of time? Yeah, she had died. And what suggestion did they make then? Yeah, don't trouble Jesus anymore over this. She is already gone. And what did Jesus say? Yeah, she's just asleep. And their reaction to that is not going to be very, very favorable. Who did Jesus take with him? Yeah. See, Peter, James, John, right? Those immediate disciples, not all of them. And what did he tell the mourners concerning the girl? We've answered this already. She's asleep, and how do they react? Yeah, they're scoffing. How dare you? That's the mindset. That's the feeling. How dare you? We know the difference between somebody who's alive and dead. How dare you even suggest that she's not? What did he say to the girl? Yeah, come forth, right? And what instruction did he give the witnesses? Give her something to eat, and you guys don't talk to anybody about this. Okay? It weren't quite to the point where Jesus is ready to be known as the guy that can raise the dead. You think he's got throngs of people coming around trying to be healed of their various illnesses. Imagine if word gets out too soon and too quickly that Jesus has the power to raise the dead, the kinds of issues that he's going to have to address and deal with, and never get to the work that he's intending to do. And so his various moments where he tells people not to go and publicize his work is intended so that his work can be fulfilled in his time and not according to the time period that others would desire it. Okay, you put those away, and we will now move into chapter 6. So, we've been across the sea over in Gennesaret near this Decapolis region. We crossed back over to the sea into where? Into the general area of Capernaum, in that area where Jairus and the woman and all that happened. Now he goes out from there and he heads back towards Nazareth, right? And so he's going back towards Nazareth, and he came into his own country, and his disciples follow him. So this is going to be an odd situation for him, or different anyway. It's one thing to be out and about these different regions and performing the miracles he's doing, presenting the message that he's presenting, that work is being fulfilled. Now he's going to go back home for a little while. And the Sabbath day came, and he began to teach in the synagogue. And many hearing him were astonished, saying, From whence hath this man these things? And what wisdom is this which is given unto him, that even such mighty works are wrought by his hands? Is not this the carpenter, the son of Mary, the brother of James and Joseph and of Judah and Simon? Are not his sisters here with us? And they were offended at him. This whole context that we're going to look at here in Mark chapter 6, and it's recorded in other places as well, but it's always baffled me a little bit, the mindset, because notice that they recognize what he's doing and saying, and the power and benefit and wisdom that's behind it. It's like saying, you're really, really, really smart, but I'm still not going to listen to you. That's kind of where they're at. The Sabbath day had come, he's gathered with them, and he's preaching, he's talking to them. And they hear him, and they're what? They're astonished. They're amazed. How did he get all this information? Where did all this knowledge come? Where did this wisdom come from? And how is it possible that all these mighty works that he's been fulfilling are accomplished in him? And what's the reasoning that they give for their disbelief? He's just Jesus, the son of Mary and Joseph. And, yeah. How can he, right? How could Jesus, the son of Mary and Joseph, do any of these kinds of things? Is he not the son of the carpenter, the son of Mary? And then he lists them. By the way, I've heard a lot of different kinds of explanations to this. I don't know any other way to receive it except in the manner in which it's said. These are his what? These are his brothers, and who else is there? And his sisters. Okay? I am fully convinced within Scripture that Mary had more children. Okay? More children. I know that is challenges the perpetual virginity issue that a lot of folks have taught, but I don't know any other way to look at these texts. And I've heard people say, well, brethren is used at times to refer to a family as a whole. Well, but that's not the context. These are brothers and sisters, very specifically named individuals that are connected. And in context, by the way, of the fact that they just named his what? His parents, right? Is not this the carpenter, the son of Mary, that we know who these guys are? This isn't just a generic reference to the fact that we know this guy's general family. We know his family. And they begin to name them one after another. And so it seems pretty clear in this narrative and in others that Jesus had real brothers and sisters that are even named within Scripture as to who they are. And you see that come up not just here in Mark's account, but in other accounts as well. Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing that they're able to deny what he's doing solely based on it just can't come from that family. Not that family. Not the carpenter family. Not those that are carpenters in common. Right? That's the idea. And Jim, you're right. When they thought the king would come, right? Many of them believe a Messiah was coming, a king was coming to replace who? In their heritage. David, right? Somebody's going to come and replace David upon an earthly throne someday, and this is going to be great. We're going to have the kingdom restored. We're not going to have to answer to Rome anymore. We're not going to have to answer to any other nation or be in bondage to anybody else. We have the ability to be our own nation again and rule our own land again. And Jesus didn't come with that message, and it bothered them. And it challenged them that he wasn't about lineage and heritage and all of the things that they might more commonly have appreciated.
Brian, in a sense, wouldn't this be a lesson in present judgment based upon past experience? They had grown up with him. They had watched him grow up. They had known his past, and now here in the present, they can't let go of the past. They can't let go of. It would be like someone who had been perhaps completely what the scriptures would consider wicked, becoming a Christian, becoming a minister, and then all of a sudden, everybody in town will
to flip their view on that. Yeah. And I think there's some of that here, especially in the fact that we don't have a lot of detail about Jesus. You've got his birth. You've got the trek into Egypt for a couple of years. You've got the travel back into Nazareth. You've got the scene in Jerusalem when he's roughly 12 years old. And then we have now, right? The work and ministry. But there's a, and I think Gary mentioned this the other day and related to a different conversation. But what is said about Jesus when he goes home with his parents when he was 12 in Jerusalem, stayed back too long, and they come and find him and he goes, what is it said about what he did? Yeah, he was in subjection. So these folks had simply watched a boy grow up in a household. That to them, that's all. All he was just another one of those children from over there in that household that they had watched be in subjection to his mother and his parents and raised just like everybody else in that neighborhood. And so they're challenged by the level of what Jesus is doing. Because he's not just teaching them, by the way. I think we need to recognize that, especially in light of this conversation. Their issue is not, they would have had teachers grow up among them. People that would have become rabbis that they were familiar with. Folks that would have been giving them instruction and spiritual guidance that they would have been familiar with. The issue isn't just that they are familiar with Jesus. It is the kind of teaching that he's doing and the kind of power that he's demonstrating that has them baffled. Not just the mere fact that he came from there and so you shouldn't be saying anything. It's the fact that the kinds of things he's saying and the miracles he's performing are above and beyond what they would have expected from that family. And that's the challenge they have. Yeah. Yeah. There is a difference between speaking with an authoritative message that was given to you and speaking with authority that you possess yourself. And that's the difference between what they had experienced. Hearing others speak would just tell them the traditions and the laws and the guide things that God had passed down to them. Jesus is speaking with authority based on his own volition, based on who he is. And that seemed to be because how could you, the son of Mary, the brother of Joseph and Judah and Simon, here your sisters, how is it that you have all this benefit? So what's Jesus' reaction to that? So he says, a prophet is not without honor, but in his own country, and among his own kin, and in his own house. It's an interesting statement. And I've often wondered about it. To be quite honest, I thought a lot about it 6 years ago, before I ever set feet back here in town. Because I was trying in my own mind to decide, does this apply or not? Is it applicable? Is there something peculiar about what Jesus is saying, or is there something very generic about what Jesus is saying here? And to be honest with you, if I had concluded that there was something just very generic about the idea that anybody coming back into their own familiar territory probably isn't going to be able to do anything, then I would have never picked up roots and come back. I don't think that's a generic thought here. Number one, what word does he use? A prophet. Well, I was able to quickly say, well, I don't fit that description, so we can scratch that one off. Because a prophet would speak from an authoritative voice, not just expounding upon what traditions or other things that might have come. And it's very specifically true of what Jesus says. And by the way, he says it in complimentary or condemning tone. Yeah, it's a condemning tone. He looks them in the eye and says, I have been where? Been over there in Gennesaret, been over there in Capernaum. I've been all over the place. And I've had people come and appreciate the things I've said, the things I've done, the work that have been accomplished. I come back home. And it's the only place that I haven't been able to find any level of honor. I don't know that he is making a generic statement that is across the board in all circumstances, but very peculiar in this moment anyway to him and the circumstances that are surrounding him. And it's evident he has had none of these other issues anywhere else but there. And it stems back to this idea that they can't get past the earthly family in which he came from. Yeah. 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 And there's even a specific nature in relationship to what the house is here, and the immediate family connections. And we've seen that evidence by the fact that this family has already on a couple of occasions tried to come and take him out of certain scenes where he found himself. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. To that idea, yeah, because there was a not necessarily a welcome wagon initially. It took time for him for Moses to be able to convince the folks that he was really there to lead them to benefit. Yeah, yeah. One because they're afraid their swine are all going to die, and another group. So because of that, he says he could there do no mighty work, save that he laid his hands upon a few sick folk and healed them, and he marveled because of their unbelief, and he went around about the villages teaching. So it's no mighty works, no tremendous miracles being performed there, because there just seems to be an understanding on Jesus' part that there wouldn't be any benefit that would come from it. They were going to remain. In fact, he marveled even with the few folks that he did heal. He said he marveled because they just were not going to leave that state of unbelief. That's hard sometimes, but it's not uncommon, by the way. There are lots of times where folks have every advantage, every opportunity, everything set before them that should be leading them right to faith and belief and conviction in relationship to Jesus. And they just don't get it. And it doesn't, there's various reasons. In this particular case, they kept pointing to his earthly family and saying, well, that's the reason we don't want to believe in him, because it can't be this young man from Mary's household over here. There's various reasons, but it astonishes Jesus that they remain in unbelief, even though they've been witness to all the things he's done and said in relationship to it, even the teachings as he goes about the villages. And that situation hasn't changed necessarily. There will still be folks, and so long, I suppose, as the earth remains, there will be folks who have every advantage, but just don't get there for one reason or another.
Then he went about villages in a circuit. In other words, he's still in the same area.
Yeah, same region, just from village to village as he's going around to different places. So he calls his 12, and he began to send them forth in what manner? 2 by 2, and gave them power over unclean spirits. And so we've already had this discussion once about the fact that the apostles had certain abilities before the Holy Spirit was poured out on them in Acts chapter 2. They've received certain abilities prior to that, because here's another example of him giving them abilities. So what happens in Acts 2, and we've already discussed it in our class, but is very different in some senses from what's been occurring up until this point, as Jesus is giving them abilities as they go out. I have always been moved by the fact that the manner in which he sent them. He didn't send them alone. He didn't send them out alone. He sent them two by two. It's kind of a funny conversation. I just actually had one the other day with a fella, another preacher, and we were talking a little bit about various places and works and places that have more than one preacher and places that don't, and the different types of experiences those things are, and he and I have. Well, I shouldn't say that. When I was younger, I did some summer preaching work with other preachers, but in all my full-time preaching work, I've always been alone. And we kind of chuckle a little. He has too, and we kind of chuckle a little bit about guys who will say, "Well, I just can't do it all." And I looked at this fellow. I'm like, we've been pert near 25 years and been doing all the sermons and all the Bible classes and stuff like that. And so on one side you get it. On the other side, you just gotta step up and do the work. My point though is that there maybe is some wisdom though. It may not work in every place, and it may not be financially ability in every place, and there may be all kinds of hindrances. But there was wisdom in the fact that Jesus didn't split his disciples up and send them out by themselves. That they would always have that support system, if you will, of somebody else with them involved in what they were doing. And somebody that they could turn to, somebody that when things got rough, they could have at least one person helping them and encouraging them, and vice versa. It could be a strength to one another. Because they're going to go into some towns, we're going to learn here in a few minutes, and what's going to happen? Yeah, the whole town's going to reject, right? It'd be awful hard if you were by yourself and you walked into a village or a community, and in that place no one was interested whatsoever in what you were bringing to them. That would be discouraging enough with two, but imagine if you were by yourself and had to endure those kinds of moments. So there is some wisdom in what Jesus has done here in sending them out with help, 2 by 2. Yeah. 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 Right. There'd be no disputing. No legitimate disputing that's just one man's thought about what had occurred. You would always have that other voice.
Besides the 70, back in Matthew chapter 10, Jesus sent out the apostles, 12 apostles, and told them to go out and preach the kingdom of heaven at hand, heal the sick, cleanse the lepers, and so on. There was a sending out, a commissioning of individuals to go out and prepare the way for him to come into other areas. Besides the 70.
Yeah. And so there Jesus understood the need to prepare people. John the Baptist's work is about that. To send out folks to make ready for ultimately what would come in the form of the gospel after the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus. But so that they didn't have to make for lack of a better description, you wouldn't have to make the leap then from Judaism straight into what Jesus is teaching through the gospel. You would have in some senses had a bridge because of the preparation that these folks would have been providing for folks. So when he sent them, he commanded them that they should take nothing for their journey, save a staff only, no scrip, no bread, no money in their purse, but be shod with sandals and not put on 2 coats. Why? Well, number one, if you're going to take a trip, you normally would do everything you can to be prepared and doubly prepared, right? You'd have sometimes backups to the backups to the backup plans, and you would know exactly. But if you did all of that, you would be able to say to yourself, "Well, I was ready and I was accomplishing this because I prepared for it. It was me." Jesus wants them to go by faith. Jesus sends them out, and He wants them to go trusting Him that this is going to be okay. This is going to work. Don't take any money. Don't take a staff, or rather, just take a staff. Nothing extra for the journey. Just maybe a walking stick. No script. No bread. Okay. Don't take a big bag full of bread just in case. Just go. And when you go to a place, what place soever ye enter into an house, there abide till you depart from that place. In other words, stay as long as they'll keep you, right? Wait, that's how this is going to work. You're going to go, and when you find a place to stay, as long as that is still conducive, and then go to the next place. But that's how you're going to sustain yourself. It's not a matter of what you take with you. Now, some of that message, by the way, after the fact will change. After the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus, and after some of those other events occur, Jesus will change His instructions. But at this point, it's about their commitment to what they're doing and trusting that this will work and building their faith and confidences along the way. If somebody doesn't receive you, He said in verse 11, nor hear you, when you depart thence, shake off the dust under your feet for a testimony against them. Verily I say unto you, it shall be more tolerable for Sodom and Gomorrah in the day of judgment than for that city. Now, that's a pretty bold statement. How tolerable was it for Sodom and Gomorrah? Well, it wasn't tolerable at all, right? It's an interesting kind of phrase. It wasn't tolerable at all. God sent down fire and brimstone from heaven and destroyed those places. It wasn't tolerable at all. But basically, Jesus says, a community that rejects the message I'm sending you out with, He says, Sodom and Gomorrah is more tolerable for them than what these places will receive. Because the advantage that these folks are being offered, and being some of the earliest to have an opportunity to know the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, the Son of God walking among them. And to reject Him would put them in a severer circumstance than that of Sodom and Gomorrah, especially when you consider that Jesus is the last message that's coming from Jehovah. There have been various stages throughout the history of man where God's information was passed down in various ways. Jesus is the final message, the final hope, the last piece of the puzzle. To reject Him puts you outside of any other hope that could be extended. All right, Lord willing, we'll come back Wednesday and pick up this description of as they travel.